For most, when preparing for a trip like backpacking at Philmont or heading out to Northern Tier, those trips are asking you to do something you've probably never done before. And with that, as you know, that requires a lot of preparation. But then you may have the question, when will I have time to prepare? And that is a great question. So let's talk about some ideas.
Hey, real quick, right before we jump into this video, if you'd do me a huge favor and hit that like button. Also, thank you for subscribing to this channel. If you'd like to be notified of future videos, please hit that bell icon. Have a great day and enjoy this video.
There are potentially many skills to learn and equipment to dial in before your trip. The list of skills to learn and equipment to dial in depends heavily upon your experience with the activity that you'll be doing on your trip. If you have a lot of experience backpacking and now you're headed to Philmont, you probably won't have to learn anything new except for the things that Philmont does that are specific to Philmont. But if you're new to backpacking, or for example headed Northern Tier, then you have a lot to learn. You have a lot to learn as an individual and you have a lot to learn as a crew. Now my mantra is, don't take anything new to the backcountry. Let me say that again. Do not take anything new to the backcountry. Now, what does that mean? Well, what this means is the fewer new things and skills that you have to learn and experiment with while actually on your trip in the backcountry, the less risk you will have while on your trip. Now remember, while you're on your trip, for most trips, you don't get second chances. A second chance to come home after a couple of days when things didn't work out. You needed to sort something out. Second chances because you had a near miss with exposure to like hypothermia. Things like that. The more experience you can collect before your trip, the better off you will be and your crew will be. Now, as a personal example, many years ago, I was debating switching from boots to trail runners. Now, I grew up in scouting, so the resistance I had to moving away from boots was tremendous. And all the normal arguments were there. And believe me, the idea that I couldn't wear anything but boots was very ingrained in my brain from 30 plus years in scouts. But I had read about and heard about there were so many potential benefits to wearing trail runners instead of wearing hiking boots. So what did I do? Well, let's talk about it. And again, I'm just using this as a personal example. These same practices and procedures will apply to any situation that you have. First, I was curious enough to find out what trail runners were all about. But I was absolutely not going to find out on a real trip with youth under my care. Because again, I had a lot of questions whether trail runners were going to work. So I went through a process of figuring out if trail runners were a good fit for me. Now here's how this process went. Just as a reminder, this is my personal story. I'm not telling you to use trail runners. You're applying this example to anything that you want. Like, for example, if you're trying out a new sleep system, or a backpack, or a tent, or if you're a woman, maybe managing your period on a trail. I mean, you get the idea. You're a smart person. So back to the example of me switching from boots to trail runners. Well, it started with doing research on backpacking with trail runners. Again, I didn't have any friends that already used trail runners. Everybody used boots. And then it was off to buy my trail runners at the local REI because they have an awesome return policy. Okay, now I had my trail runners. Well, start small. It started with walking with my trail runners around town. First with just the shoes, and then eventually with a fully loaded backpack. It started on nice paved streets and sidewalks, and then I went out to trails in the parks, and this took several weeks to build up experience. And all the time I was asking myself questions like, what was working? What wasn't working? Did I need to adjust anything? What if this happened? What if that happened? And all of this experimentation was taking place at home where I had a large safety net. A friend could pick me up in just a few minutes if things didn't go right, or absolutely worst case, emergency services were available at a moment's notice. And with all of that experience built at home, now it was time to take advantage of wearing trail runners outside all day for days in a row, in all kinds of weather, like rain, cold, heat. And the best time and place to practice that was on our weekend campouts with the troop. Why is that? Because even though I wasn't home anymore, I had a home away from home with the support of my troop, just in case something happened that I need help with. And on those weekend campouts, that's when I could most replicate, on a small scale, what my trip would be like. So I started with day packs and then worked up to a fully loaded backpack. And all of this was done on day hikes, on weekend campouts with the troop. Now, by this point, I had a few months of experience and everything was going smooth. And at this point, I knew trail runners would work. And I had a good idea of what it would be like to wear them day after day after day on a multi-day backpacking trip. I knew what it was like to have wet feet and cold feet and how to manage that. I also knew that I had plenty of ankle support that didn't come from wearing boots. I also knew there was a tremendous advantage to wearing trail runners, but I still hadn't done it for real, meaning on an actual multi-day backpacking trip. And this is the point where you may find yourself, and you probably will find yourself. Because even with all this experience, I was still noodling over whether I would actually do it for real on a trip with youth under my supervision. See, when I was on campouts, we had the other adults there, so if something happened to me, it wouldn't affect the scouts. And so there was a great safety net if something went wrong. And also by now, I knew that for me, trail runners were by far my preferred choice over boots. So what to do? Well, fortunately for me, I had a multi-day backpacking trip with a friend coming up. And so I decided that I would switch over to trail runners for that trip to the mountains. So I still had a little bit of safety net through the assistance of my friend if needed. But I wasn't in charge of any youth. So if I was going to finally, once and for all, convince myself that I could backpack with trail runners, this trip would be the opportunity. And I think it's important to note that you probably won't have an opportunity to go backpacking on a multi-day trip before your actual backpacking trip. And I want to reassure you that's okay. You just need to get to a point in your experience collection process that you have put in a reasonable amount of effort to gain a reasonable amount of experience with whatever you're learning. So this last step of me personally wearing my trail runners on my backpacking trip wasn't so much that I was learning about backpacking with trail runners as it was actually going backpacking with the trail runners to again prove for myself once and for all that trail runners would work and I preferred those over boots. So I want to pass on this assurance to you. You will be smart enough to know when you have enough experience and have some self-confidence. I had to build it up for myself. I know you'll do the same. And so just to wrap up my story, I learned for myself that all those months of slowly building experience, trying out a new piece of gear, it paid off. I didn't have anything happen to me when I went out for real on my actual backpacking trip that I hadn't already experienced, nor did anything happen to me that I couldn't manage because I had thoroughly built up my experience level a little bit at a time. Now let me recap. Don't waste your weekend. Take advantage of all those campouts and practice hikes to build your experience with whatever it is you're trying out. Notice and remember that I started on short hikes around home and worked my way up to weekend campouts. The fact that I ended up taking an actual backpacking trip in the mountains wasn't for the benefit of me still trying to figure things out, because I'd already accumulated enough experience on those weekend campouts and all those hikes around town that the trip to the mountains was just for me finally proving to myself that wearing trail runners was okay. And one last thought. You don't have to only try things out on a weekend, and you've probably already figured that out. You can try things at home over several days, and I'll give you 2 examples. If you're a woman and you need to learn how to manage your period on the trail, you can try the same techniques that you would use on the trail or think that you would use on the trail to manage your period at home. And if it doesn't work out, you're at home with familiar resources and in a familiar environment. And one other example I have. One of our adult scouters wanted to go backpacking with us to Philmont, but he had back problems and he wasn't for sure if his back would hold up. So this is what I asked for him to do. I asked him to sleep on the floor of his house every night for 10 nights in a row using his sleep system. So sleeping on his air mattress that he would take backpacking on the floor of the bedroom. Then it was sleeping on his floor for 10 more days, and every afternoon taking a fully loaded backpack on a hike around town, and do that again for 10 days. And what did he learn? Well, he learned for himself that his back would be just fine. Okay? And if it didn't work out, he was at home. He could go see his chiropractor, go see his doctor, get his back fixed up. And guess what? He learned that he was just fine sleeping on the floor and wearing a fully loaded backpack afterwards. And he went on not 1, but 2 backpacking trips with us. And that's how, for example, to not waste your time and opportunities available to you to learn. And if you think about it, you probably have a lot of opportunities to learn. If you need to figure out if your rain gear will work, but it doesn't rain on campouts, well, go hike around town in the rain. Be creative. And most importantly, be disciplined enough to build experience for yourself and your crew before you show up on your trip to the backcountry. So again, don't waste your weekend. And that ends this video. Have a blessed day.
Hey, I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you'd like to support this channel, remember, please subscribe to this channel. Tell your friends about it. Thanks for hitting that like button. Everything here is free. I want to give back to the community. I want to give to you everything here for free. I've been out in the outdoors for a long, long time, and it's great that I can be able to give all this information to you. That is what's most important to me. If you would like to give back, I do have a GoFundMe page set up, and you can follow the link. And if you'd like to, if you're a youth with your parents' support, I would gladly accept your donations. Thank you and have a blessed day.